Hey, welcome back to Slow Bells. Today I'm in Mobile, Alabama. And in this video, I'm going to show you the portion of the Great Loop trip that goes from Paducah, Kentucky, up the Tennessee River and down the Tombigbee Waterway to Mobile. Check it out. First of all, let's review where Slow Bells has been and where she is now headed. As you probably know, the Mississippi River starts in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area and flows past St. Louis down to New Orleans. But when Slow Bells got to Cairo, Illinois, she left the Mississippi River and headed up the Ohio River. But we only stayed on the Ohio for less than 50 miles. That brought us up to Paducah, Kentucky, and our next change of course. The road to Mobile, Alabama requires us to jump onto the Tennessee River, and there are two ways to do this. But first, let's zoom in on the Paducah area on Google Maps. Once again, here's the Mississippi down to Cairo, and here's the Ohio as far as Paducah. We need to get to Kentucky Lake, which is just a reservoir on the Tennessee River. The purple arrow indicates where we need to go in order to eventually get to Mobile, Alabama on the Gulf of Mexico. There are two ways to get from Paducah to Kentucky Lake. One way is to go upstream on the Ohio River just a few more miles, then take a right turn at the Cumberland River. Roughly 25 miles up the Cumberland River, you pass through a lock and dam and emerge onto a reservoir that holds back the Cumberland River. If you stayed on the Cumberland River, you could go all the way to Nashville. But we don't need to go that far on our trip. Kentucky Lake, where we need to go, runs parallel to this Cumberland River reservoir. As a matter of fact, the landmass that separates the Cumberland River reservoir from Kentucky Lake is called the land between the lakes. Fortunately, they dug a canal here between these two lakes so you can get from one to the other. The other way to go from Paducah to Kentucky Lake is to hop on the Tennessee River near Paducah and stay there. You will eventually pass through a lock and dam, and on the other side of that lock and dam is Kentucky Lake. Remember, Kentucky Lake is really just a reservoir on the Tennessee River. Eventually, we will need to leave the Tennessee River in order to get down to Mobile, Alabama, but we have some miles to cover before that happens. On a cold and foggy November morning, Slow Bells left Paducah with some other loopers and headed up the Tennessee River towards the lock and dam that forms Kentucky Lake. We spent another cold night at the Green Turtle Bay Resort and Marina. Once we had warmed up the following morning, we continued upstream on Kentucky Lake and the Tennessee River. One morning, I was down in the engine room doing my morning checks. I forced a water hose out of the way to do some cleaning under the water hose, but I forgot to put the water hose back in its normal position. This resulted in a kink in the water hose, and that severely restricted the flow of cooling water to the engine. Neither the engine nor the engine's impeller appreciated the lack of cooling water. We arrived at the Pickwick Lock and Dam late in the day, and we had to wait for some barge traffic to finish locking through in front of us. It was starting to get dark when we finally entered the lock, and it was pitch dark when we finally left the lock. My radar was not operational since I had not finished repairing the damage my mast had sustained on the Illinois River. Fortunately, there was an anchorage in an inlet very close to the dam, and my Navionics charts guided me in there flawlessly. We had to wait until morning to view our surroundings at the anchorage. Once you pass into the reservoir above Pickwick Dam, it is time to leave the Tennessee River. From the Mississippi River, you are constantly gaining elevation to reach this lake behind Pickwick Dam, but it is all downhill from Pickwick Lake to the Gulf of Mexico. From Pickwick Dam, the Tennessee River continues in this direction towards Knoxville, Tennessee. But if you're headed for Mobile, Alabama, you want to take a right turn here and head down the Tombigbee Waterway. It was at this turnoff that I performed one of my more spectacular navigational screw-ups. I made a reservation at a marina located here, but I mistakenly pulled into a marina located here. It was some time after I had checked in to this marina that I realized what a boo-boo I had made. We waited out some cold, windy weather at this marina and then headed down the Tombigbee in search of Mobile. We saw several of these exotic-looking spillways that held back water from side channels. One morning, we saw some kind of Saturday morning fishing tournament getting started. I counted 30 fishing boats in the water, and there were more being launched from a nearby boat ramp. I was very impressed that Dave would see fit to salute me in the morning, but it turned out he was just trying to keep the morning sun out of his eyes. I caught this lock peeing on my boat. I was tempted to return the insult, but there were just too many witnesses. It was cold enough on some mornings to see frost, but we never saw any snow. Some of the boats a week or two behind us were not so lucky. My mast had gotten into an argument with a bridge earlier back on the Illinois River. It was a while before I had weather that was dry enough and warm enough to do the repair, but I eventually got the mast epoxied back together. Raising the repaired mast meant that I could now use my radar and my anchor light again. This has got to be the loneliest phone booth I have ever seen. These are replicas of two of Columbus's ships. I took this picture in Demopolis, Alabama. I wonder if they were still trying to find India. Demopolis was also where my shipmate Dave returned home to Virginia. I would single-hand slow bells to Mobile, Alabama. Since there is not always an inlet to anchor in on the Tombigbee Waterway, it is not uncommon to anchor off from the side of the main channel. But you need to anchor well clear of this main channel since barge traffic is a 24-hour per day activity. On another day, I anchored next to this sandbar overnight. The shallows created by the sandbar and the bend in the river kept the towboats a comfortable distance away from me. Although I was very close to shore, once again, the current held the boat perfectly aligned, parallel with the shore overnight. This is the lock and dam at Coffeyville, Alabama. At first glance, it looks like just another lock and dam, but this one is very special. It is the last lock and dam that stands between a looper and the Gulf of Mexico. Yeah, baby, bring it on! Slow Bells and I finally made it to Mobile, Alabama on a very nice Sunday. There were several marinas on the south side of Mobile in Dog River, so that is where Slow Bells and I went. This turned out to be the most exciting part of the whole day. To get to Dog River, you head south down Mobile Bay, then turn northwest into Dog River. My navionics charts showed very deep water if you stayed in the middle of the Dog River Channel, so I wasn't worried. However, the actual water depth turned out to be between 5.5 and 7 feet. I almost needed a change of underwear by the time I got to the marina. Let's say that you are traveling down a river in your trawler and you see a towboat with barges in the distance headed your way. You call the tow on the radio and ask him how you should pass him when you meet. And let's imagine that his answer is, "I'll see ya on 2." Anyone who has boated between Chicago and Mobile has lost track of how many times they have heard this reply. But if you are new to the game, you might have no idea what that towboat captain is talking about. So let's talk about passing other boats for a minute. Most people know that the left side of the boat is called the port side and the other side is called the starboard side. But let's change this a little. The word port is just a one-syllable word, and we're going to call the port side our one-whistle side. And since the word starboard is 2 syllables, we're going to consider the right side of the boat to be our two-whistle side. You got that? If you and the towboat are heading opposite directions, this would be an example of a one-whistle pass. Your one-whistle side passes next to the towboat's one-whistle side. On the other hand, if the towboat captain says, "I'll see ya on 2," then you would pass like this, with your two-whistle side next to his two-whistle side. Now, let's consider the situation where you are overtaking a slower moving towboat. I found it interesting that even a slow moving boat like mine was actually faster than most of the towboats I passed. Let's say that you need to pass a towboat like this, with your port side next to the towboat's starboard side. Now, would that be considered a one-whistle pass or a two-whistle pass? In this overtaking situation, the whistle signal applies to the faster moving boat, the overtaking vessel, which is going to be you most of the time. So in this case, this would be considered to be a one whistle pass. If the towboat captain had said, "I'll see you on two," then you would pass like this, where your two whistle side was going to be closest to the towboat as you pass by. By the way, the use of the term whistle refers to earlier days before radios were used. Back then, the captains of two approaching ships would use whistles powered by steam or compressed air to communicate how the two ships should pass each other. I wouldn't sweat the passing one whistle, two whistle stuff too much, even if it is a little confusing right now. Do a little studying and rest assured you will have ample opportunity to practice your passing skills if you go from Chicago to Mobile. That's about it for this video. In the next video, we're going to be heading eastward for a change along the Gulf of Mexico shoreline in Alabama and the Florida Panhandle. That sounds exciting to me. Later.